right, it's your Geordie Journos back in my usual spot. I'm Liam Kennedy, Dominic Skur, Jordan Cronin, here to talk about a particular subject that has brought about a lot of emotion on Tyneside over the last 3 years. You could say, leading back best part of 18 years, it's brought about so much emotion, such as the ownership situation being at St James's Park. Of course, I'm talking about the Newcastle United takeover, and of course, I'm talking about it being 3 years since the day that PIF, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, along with PCP Capital Partners, of course, Amanda Stavely famous, and the Reuben brothers, RB Sports and Media, got that right, didn't I? Yeah, thought so. I never do. Wouldn't be the first time on here. Took over the football club. Of course, PCP is no more. It is just PIF and the Reubens at the moment. But there's been a lot of change at Newcastle United. Some for good, some for bad. I can't get my words out here. Some may say there's been some bad changes. However, we're here to delve a little deeper and talk about the major subjects that have cropped up over the last 3 years in particular. Right, I'm going to come straight to you, Jordan. Progress. What progress?
Well, there was progress, fast progress the first 2 years of the takeover, absolutely rapid, from Eddie Howe coming through the door to a relegation battle to then 12 months later playing in the Champions League, and it was 12 months this month when Newcastle United hammered PSG. So for those first 2 years it was an absolute dream. It was beyond people's dreams. I think we've all dreamed big with this takeover and probably still do, but to have that progress within 2 years, I don't think anyone could have predicted it. So that was brilliant, but I would say the last 12 months it hasn't been as quick in terms of progress. There's probably been a little bit of I wouldn't say a stagnation, but it certainly hasn't followed the 2 years, and I think this year's where it sort of evened out, if you like, where the ownership now are maybe being tested in terms of where do Newcastle United go from here now, because I've had that progress that maybe evened out a little bit now. So what's the decision now? Where do Newcastle United go next? And that's the $1 million question, which I'm sure us guys are going to discuss.
Before I come to you, Dom, I just want to make it clear to everybody, it might just look like we're sitting somewhere totally random, but we are in a new spot today, the Brandlin Arms on Gosforth High Street. You may know it, you may not. Fantastic place, and they're quite brilliantly hosting us here to record the Geordie Journos on Shots TV. Right, Dom, your thoughts? I mean, to give context, it was a dark place after the years of Mike Ashley that PIF walked into.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a lazy thing to say, look how far we've come. But I've just said off camera, what you want from a takeover is a club to have ambition, to strive to be better. And over the last 3 years, Newcastle have strived to be better. It hasn't always been a straight line. Progress isn't always a straight line. But generally speaking, Newcastle United are light years ahead of what they were 3 years ago. The only problem is what Jordan alluded to, the progress was perhaps too quick in some ways, where coming fourth that second season is almost, and getting Champions League football has probably made people realise this is what the club can be, these are the levels. And then last season just felt like, with the injuries of course, felt like just a bit of a regression, and the problem with sort of PSR transfers, that sort of, the investment sort of had to retract slightly, and I think mistakes probably have been made in the transfer market, particularly last summer, where Newcastle are investing a lot of money in players not for the here and now, when they probably needed players for the here and now. And yeah, I think if you're looking at the club, and had they finished 7th in that first full season and then 4th last season, we're having a slightly different conversation. It's just because it went so high and then maybe plateaued slightly, where we're sort of saying it's been great, it's been positive, there's been a lot of progress, but where do Newcastle go from here? Because you talk 5 years since the takeover. Eddie Howe was asked about this in his last press conference ahead of the Everton game. Where do you expect the club to be? The ambitions were to win everything, be competing at the top. So far, 3 years in, Newcastle have Champions League group stage and a Carabao Cup final to show for it, which doesn't sound like an awful lot. It's great if you were told that when the takeover happened, that's what would happen. You'd go, all right, positive. We're at levels where we've never been in the past 2 decades, really. But to reach those levels and then regress slightly is slightly frustrating. But all in all, it's been a positive 3 years, I'd say.
I think the takeover in itself, without going into too much detail, has probably suffered from a perception crisis in many ways from the start, and I think us in the media are possibly a little bit guilty of that as well.
Never.
I think everybody has been, that there was a perception. It wasn't just any takeover, it was a takeover by one of the biggest companies on the planet, effectively, with untold riches.
Richest owners in the world was the tag given.
So with that in mind comes a lot of, tangents. People can run off in angles thinking, wow, we're going to have this, that and the other, and the football landscape as is at present and will be for the foreseeable future. I don't ever see that changing personally. I think there is a definite football elite that is determined to maintain that elite and doesn't want teams like Manchester City, Newcastle United and others breaking into that. They've been it was tough to stop Man City because of rules that weren't in place. That's all. That framework is there now, and it's even harder for Newcastle United. I think there's positives to think that this is a long-term project. In the short term, if it had been any takeover other than the richest in the world, you would probably be saying a 4th, a 7th, beating relegation, a 4th, a 7th, a Carabao Cup back in the Champions League. You would mostly have said that's been really good. Yeah. But there is a perception crisis of this takeover, and it's difficult to break that. Even me sitting here saying this, I can't break that without thinking part of us is a little disappointed by the way it's stagnated. But I wouldn't say stagnated is a strong word. It has stalled slightly. I think there's been a little bit of a lull, and it's how you then kick that back off again. I think the next couple of steps in this takeover process are probably the most important, and that goes down to stuff on the field and off the field. We've of course had the power struggle between Eddie Howe and Paul Mitchell. I think personally, that's my personal opinion, I think the appointment of Paul Mitchell is a positive step, a step in the right direction at bringing proper football and structures to a football club that should run like other elite football clubs. I also think the off the field stuff, there's a lot of decisions to be made. Of course, we're seeing some of this play out in public with announcements being made with regards the feasibility study. I mean, I see you guys addressed it last week on the Geordie Journals on YouTube, saying that was it really a big announcement? I thought there was nuance to what they said, and I thought it pointed towards, I think there's going to be something fairly significant. I do think it's my understanding and my belief that there is an absolute priority to remain in the surrounds of the current site. There's an that's what I understand them to want to do, and I think I'm not privy. None of us are privy to what's in this feasibility study, and even any other journalists out there who tell you they aren't.
Okay.
It's just fact. It's not happening. It isn't. But from good contacts that I've got at various places, I know that is a real priority. Is that it is to remain. And I haven't seen the feasibility study, so I don't know what it suggests. However, there could be problems with what they hope to do. It's not going to be an easy process, but writing that next big check is huge, because this isn't, again, if PIF commit to say new St James's Park or new form of St James's Park somewhere else close, which it's probably that's what they're looking to do. Probably it isn't going to be a short-term thing. That's the big check I'm talking about, and that proves it's a long-term project and commitment. Because so far all we've seen is a lick of paint at the training ground, a lick of paint at the stadium, with some football progress. As a wider societal thing, which I spoke to a lot of people involved in the deal before it happened, and they were very keen to stress to me that it was more about the wider investment in the city. They said, look at what Abu Dhabi has done at Manchester City for a framework of the type of thing that we would like to do here. There's been none of that, and 3 years down the line it does beg the question, where does PIF stand in priority? Where does Newcastle United stand in PIF's priority? Is there a long-term future here? If they commit to anything with regards to development at St James's Park, let's be realistic about this, and there's probably going to be a disappointment to people, but let's be realistic. It's not going to happen before the next Euros, because St James's Park hosts it, so it's going to be after that. So you're probably talking before anything starts would at least be another 5 years.
Yeah.
So you might be talking, depending on whether there's a few people commit to the angers around green and sustainability and those kind of things, which Newcastle United got stuck in that mud under John Hall. That was a long time ago now, 30 or so years ago. I could see the same thing happening. We could be talking about a 10-year project, but the benefit in them committing to that now, in early 2025, for me, would be that Newcastle United is a long-term project, and they are committed to stay and remain. And until, I've said it on here before, until they sign a big cheque, I still remain with a slight standpoint of scepticism, and I think that's a healthy place to be. They've never shown any signs that they're not committed to Newcastle United. I'm not coming at it from that standpoint. However, I want to see them commit to something real and tangible.
Yeah.
That not only does the football club, they've committed to players, the football club will lose players like that.
Yeah.
I want to see something that stays and lasts longer than owners and even us sitting here now. So I want that. That's kind of my next big step, is what I'd say. And after the break, we'll delve a little bit deeper into more of the issues and positives of what we've seen from Newcastle United takeover in the last 3 years. Your Tory Journals here at the Brandlin Arms on Gosforth High Street. Before the break, I was talking a little bit about my thoughts on the next steps in Newcastle United's journey and how I think writing that big cheque from PIF would be a huge sign of significance, not only for the last 3 years of the takeover, but probably for the next 10. Thoughts, Dom, on stadium redevelopment, stadium moving, whatever it may be, or thoughts on PIF committing to something?
Yeah, well, the stadium's obviously the big one, that's the long-term one, but even something as little as the training ground, which has been improved, but you can move to a new state-of-the-art training ground a lot quicker than you can build a new stadium. So the fact that hasn't happened is maybe a source of frustration as well. Obviously the training ground's a lot better than it has been, but still isn't state-of-the-art. It's still not among the best in the Premier League. It's not Premier League elite. But
I'm just going to remember reading something in the Daily Mail that was described as putting lipstick on a pig.
I mean, it is all right when you're there.
They did spend a couple of million on it, like.
They did. 10. I think
10
it's
million,
10,
aye.
So more than a couple.
So,
it's expensive lipstick.
but yeah, that's a source of frustration. But ultimately, it is better. But that big check still hasn't happened, and I think the stadium is the big sticking point. I think any club who's made forward strides in the last 20 or so years has invested heavily in the stadium, and where Newcastle go from here, I think the stadium will be the centre of that if they're going to be that elite club. And you talked about before the break, where did Newcastle move? Can they stay at St James's Park? I think, as me and Jordan said on our YouTube video last week, I'm all for leaving St James's Park, but it has to be, a new stadium has to be based more or less in the same location, where that Leazes Park, Castle Leazes area, just north of St James's Park, that's prime real estate for Newcastle United to build a new state-of-the-art stadium. And we're talking about potential capacities. I'd say 70,000 is realistic, but caveat that with Newcastle need to be selling it out. That demand's still there. As soon as you have 1,000 empty seats, the whole idea, the model of your stadium attendance and capacity falls apart, really.
It does. However, most people out there won't be accountants, and that won't matter little to anybody getting a ticket. So I was coming in from, I actually get it, that the financial model is right, that if you almost make it too easy to get tickets, people become complacent. However, I think we don't want to be having the same conversation in 15 years' time. Football is has grown exponentially in the last 10 to 15 years. I don't think that's going to change. I think it's
getting more expensive though, and people
exactly
are finding it harder to spend money.
Yes, they are. However, I don't think that's going to change either, and I think people are mostly finding a will or a way to get there to St James's Park. It isn't a financially affluent area, all considered. Sorry, but I do think I think you've got to. I think it's got to be a little bit more to not be having the same conversation in 20 years.
70,000.
No, more than what people have been suggesting.
Yeah,
the 60 to 65. I would almost think that's probably right, realistically. However, I would like to see a little bit more, just to, because I think you could sell. Sunderland get promoted next season. You sell 70,000, no bother. Man United come here, 70,000. You give more to away fans, so probably 60 to 70% would sell more than 3,000 of the teams in the Premier League. Probably a few of the smaller ones wouldn't, but you give that number to Manchester United, you give that number to a number of other clubs, Arsenal and others, they'll sell it no problem.
It's about internationally though, isn't it, as well? So the thing I would say about Manchester City Stadium is you've got Champions League nights where, and I might be wrong here, I don't believe Manchester City sell the Etihad on Champions League night, yet they're building an extension on one of their stands, so there must be some theory as to why they want to build more seats. And I think Newcastle have a long way to go before they're sort of a real global brand, but probably a criticism of Liverpool from Liverpool fans is getting fans in from the US, other parts, because they spend money and they're coming over for a day out a week in Liverpool. To go to Anfield is like a spectacular occasion, and I do wonder if Newcastle, as they progress, will try and look to do
I think
the
it's
same.
Much better.
It's key to being an elite club, isn't it, where it's having that global fan base, which is what Peter Silverson, etc. has spoken
it's
about.
It's not good though.
No, it's
That's
not.
That's my opinion.
But
like,
no.
There might be people that
and I agree with that totally.
I don't like that.
No.
I'm not just a colloquial Geordie who wants to keep keep Newcastle United
It's
myself.
our club.
However, but it is our club.
It's a local people should be able to go to.
It should be the priority.
Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree with that enough.
People won't all like that, by the way. There will be people who don't like the idea of what we're saying. I think that's actually reasonably controversial, but it's a hill I'm willing to die on. I think genuinely, we all know sitting here, it was in the blood. You didn't have a choice, it was in the blood. We started as we've always meant to go on, and we've all been there through some pretty rubbish times. Obviously we've been lucky enough in a privileged position that our jobs have taken away from having to pay for tickets for matches. However, but just go to a recent example, first chance I get to get a ticket in the ballot, I'll go and take my kids because I want them to feel the same and have that connection with their football club in their city, in their town. That doesn't mean you can't support Newcastle United from wherever you can. Of course you can. However, I do think priority should be given to fans who are here and who've always been here. And that's why I would like to see, which is really fanciful, but see, you were to go to a 65 to 70,000 seater stadium, I'd love to see that opened up, to say, right, we're going to put 10,000 more season tickets on sale. Take them if you want. However, football clubs now aren't doing that.
Newcastle will have to break the mould in many ways, wouldn't they, of what other clubs have done, and I would love to see that, but
they won't.
No, it's because that's just it's a sad reality of where elite top flight football is where you look at the money that's sort of been dragged out of local fans in terms of your kits and everything else, and even last year with tickets, when you're having to pay tickets up front in cup games, it's just trying to get money out of fans, and it goes back around to what we mentioned sort of at the start of the video about the PSR situation and finding as much money from any avenue as you can, so it goes back in the football club so you can go and sign players, which I don't. It's one of them. It's one of the sort of the quirks of being an elite club, isn't it? It's not nice. I would much prefer to have a football club that, as you say, breaks the mould and gets and prioritise local fans, but I just don't see how that happens, sadly, and I know it's a really probably a sad thing to say, to be honest.
Yeah, it's tapping into the fans who have money, or the general football fans. You go to Man City, you see that sort of, you can see the players in the tunnel. It's all about that match day experience that people will pay hundreds of pounds for, not the £50 ticket. It's changing. You're seeing even at St James's Park now, there's 2 new corporate areas have emerged. That's sort of an unfortunate
but it's the way
fallout of what's happened with commercial revenue having to be driven tenfold in
And
a PSR world.
it all comes back, it always comes back to the elite of football wanting to maintain football for themselves.
Yeah.
And it means making it, so that basically means you've got to make as much money from within your football club as possible. So clubs with bigger, wider football communities, like Liverpool, long established, probably one of the best supported club in the world potentially. Manchester United not far off. These kind of clubs are happy with this model because it doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
Because they can tap into that market like that.
That's why it was so frustrating almost immediately after the Newcastle takeover. These new rules get introduced that we're seeing Man City fighting at the moment, and Amanda Staveley came out and publicly said it peed off.
Yeah.
So, like, the reaction to the Newcastle takeover and the fallout of it has left Newcastle are fighting more than just their rival clubs. They're fighting the powers that be as well. That's what it feels like anyway.
So much pressure on commercial revenue, which if you look at the takeover of the 3 years, have Newcastle United maximised their commercial opportunities, and they're probably still, as much as they've made really good strides actually by getting closer to the so-called Big Six, they're still a long way off a lot of clubs, and that goes back around the commercial. Obviously you've had the Seller deal, the Adidas deal, but you know, we talk about a stadium, you would think a stadium sponsor would be at one of the top of the list, and then you've got a training ground sponsor, which I can't believe they haven't got that yet. A training kit sponsor as well, so there's many untapped opportunities there that it hasn't been or maybe been explored but hasn't been finalised yet, which I think should be a priority actually.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the bit. Going back to what you said before, it would be amazing to see Newcastle United break a mould, and it'd be good to see them be a football club that says, you know what, we can do it both ways. We can make this money. We have a lot of money. Yes, we've got to make sure we get that into the club in the right way, but we also want to maintain why we bought this football club in the first place. The thing that made it so special was not only was it good value, but it also had a big core support, a crowd that was just renowned Europe over almost for being able to drag its team over the line or towards success. That passion for the city, the one club mentality. I think there's a lot of good things about the football club, and I think you risk losing that by just padding it and flooding it with high end ticket prices, which can only be bought by people who, not only bought, but more likely to be bought by people who don't really share that same passion as your regular man on Gosforth High Street. As we are just off Gosforth High Street.
It's one of the fancy.
It is. Probably a really bad example. Champagne Geordies. Worst example possible.
No, but I know what you mean.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
It was in the right place, wasn't it? Apart from the wrong location, if you know what I mean.
Wallsend High Street.
Wallsend.
I see that as a man from Wallsend.
He's a man from Wallsend, he's allowed to say that.
Yeah.
Right, so it's international break as well, isn't it? So nothing doing for the next week or so. We'll be watching Newcastle United players with a keen eye. The ones available, the ones not available.
The Newcastle goalkeeper derby.
Which one's that?
Nick Pope, Vlachodimos, Greece v England.
Yeah.
Nick Pope won't be in goal, but
No, he'll be watching on. Well,
I'm sure they'll share a moment on the touchline.
I thought he was alright when he came on against Wimbledon last week.
Yeah, he was good.
Was he?
Composed. He's a composed goalkeeper on the ball.
I've just come back from Greece.
Good to have you
I
back.
love him over there.
Did they?
I don't know, I never asked. Right, I think that probably rounds things up for your latest episode of the Geordie Journals on Shots TV. And we will see you this time next week at 10:30.